Hey, welcome back to another video. In today's video, we're going to be getting our database connected to our API. When we're going to be installing a new library called TypeORM. We are going to be using that as a way to keep our types in sync with our database. We're going to be setting up using TypeORM within our API today. And then in the next video, we'll actually see how do we take our task completion types and get schema automatically generated for them. But for now, what we're going to do is how do we get our database actually connected with our Express app. So I've already went ahead and created this database folder or this database file, and this is the credentials. This is the config to actually set up and hook into our database. So if you remember this host here, this is one particular thing that's can be kind of interesting. Within our Docker Compose, our database service itself is called DB. And so that's what we're going to use for our host. When I was setting this up initially, I had used localhost, and we have to remember that the Docker Compose is going to change the Postgres instance is only accessible via, well, it's actually not accessible through our host machine unless we opened up that port. So instead, we want the API to reference this host, and so we're going to use DB as that host name. In addition to that, we'll see some of these entities are going to fill up, and our migrations are going to slowly, we'll start putting them in there. I've added these two folders, and we'll start throwing those, we'll start populating some of these in our next video. But for now, I want to point out something, and that's going to be, how do we actually get, if you remember our test files, if we come here, when we run these tests, there is no database. This is eventually this will be it's in a Docker container now, but we not only need this Docker container to turn up, but we need our database to actually turn on as well. So in order to understand how that's going to work, we are going to create another new file here. And that's going to be test, we'll just call it testdev.sh. In this file, we're going to do a simple Docker Compose down. And then we're going to do a Docker Compose run. We're going to run our API, and then we're going to run we could run this test dev immediately, or what is this? Test watch. Let's see what this is doing from our package. So test watch is just going to run everything there. I think that would be fine. Let's go ahead and try this. So in order to do this, we need something that's actually going to call this sh. So we could just do a simple testdev.sh. We can do test. Okay, and so this will be our new command to actually run our tests. And you'll see here our tests are running, but we don't actually know whether or not our database service is running. And so what we're going to do in order to try that out, we're going to need to install, if you've noticed here in our database, we actually need another couple of libraries that I'm going to quickly install for us as well. Okay, so there's our libraries saved for us. Here's our database, and we have this helper function that's going to connect to our database. And what we're going to do is we're just going to simply call this in our app itself, and we're going to connect to our database. So in order to call this, we're going to do a simple connect to database from database. And then we're going to call this somewhere in our app. So we can call it here. The only interesting thing though is we're listening and then we're only connecting to our database after. We might get some actual race conditions when we do this, but we can actually try this out. Let's do bash. We should see our database connected if we did this correct. So there's our actual database. So we see that we were able to connect, and we can actually do a trial run. Let's just pretend that our password is 123. So we're going to put the wrong password in and see what actually happens here. So our database connection failed when we actually tried to connect. So we're going to bring that back out, change our password back, and we'll see all of our tests are passing again. I kind of wonder why this is improperly exiting. If I had to take a guess, if we uninitialize our package, or rather if we don't connect to our database, do we still get this error? We don't. And so what's happening is when we connect this database, we still have this open connection. And so what we want to do is get this database and actually close it. So if we were to app data source dot destroy would be the word. So we can actually take this data source and bring this into our tests themselves. And then after all of our tests finish, this is going to come from database. Let's see, export default. It's just the default. Let's just double check. And we can come down to the bottom here and we can do an await destroy. And let's see if that fixes our failures. Yeah, so we have no more exit graceful errors. So we've got our database now set up. That's gonna be it for today's video. And our next one, we're going to add our first migration. We'll turn our task, these two interfaces here, we'll turn them into what we call entities. And that way TypeORM will be able to understand what we're trying to save. We'll actually get some schemas generated for them, and we will be able to migrate our database, and we'll actually have the ability to start saving these tasks into our database shortly after. So we'll see you next time. I appreciate you following along.